Today is April 11th. Welcome to Native Calgarian. Oki, Naganago Mekoche Chistakomaki. My name is Red Thunder Woman. My married English name is Michelle Robinson, and I use she and her pronouns. Native Calgarian is being recorded on the lands of the Niitsitapi, which is the Blackfoot Confederacy. The Blackfoot south of the opposed US-Canadian border are the Blackfeet. North of the border are the Siksika, Gunai, and Bagani of the Confederacy. These lands are Treaty 7, signed September 22nd, 1877, with signatures that include the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Wesley, Chiniki, Bearspaw Nations of the Stoney Nations, and the Dene from Tsuut'ina Nation. I acknowledge all First Nation, Métis, Inuit, status, and non-status across Turtle Island as the keepers of these lands. All non-Indigenous are treaty partners with the government signing on your behalf. I honor the Blackfoot as the elders and members have been so kind to me on my Red Road journey. Elder Red Crane taught me how to pronounce my spirit name. I was born in Calgary, or in Blackfoot, Mohkinstsis, as Michelle Elliott, an English name which has afforded me privilege in a English colonial world. My mother is Northern Slavey Dene or Satu Dene, but my Indian Act and Post status card by the Canadian government says Yellowknives Dene. My father is so Canadian. I am a daughter of the Mayflower and a daughter of the American Revolution while having an Indian Act and Post status card. My Dene lineage roots me in the land of the Hare people, also called the Great Bear Lake people in Treaty 11. I'm a native to Turtle Island, and my Dene nation is a visitor to this area of Quincho Tine Indahe in Satu Dene, meaning mini horse town, named after the Calgary Stampede. Land acknowledgements are critical for creating a safer space for Indigenous, as well as honoring the host as the guest and acknowledging your role as a treaty partner. My humblest apologies to the Blackfoot elders and language keepers as I try to learn proper pronunciation. Any mistakes or misinterpretations will be on me. I encourage questions so that misunderstandings can be cleared up as soon as possible. I do not speak on behalf of all Indigenous, but I share what I know as I walk down my red road. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. Thank you to previous donors for sharing or showing your support. If you value listening and can, or watching and can afford to give, thank you. For those who cannot afford to give, I'd love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or your questions. I also have a YouTube channel where you can subscribe. Go to nativecalgarian.com for the latest podcast and pin posts on social media. So I'm super excited because I'm a total nerd who went to Liberal convention again. And at Liberal convention, we did a bunch of policy stuff again. So I'm super excited. And then I also have my friend Kathy with me. And it's super fun to have you here. Welcome, Kathy.
Hi, Michelle. I'm so glad to join you on the day after the convention and hear your dissection of the convention.
Yeah, no, it's way fun. So I kind of put out a call on social media to say, hey, if you guys have questions, just ask me. Here's your 20-minute window. And then I was like totally screwing around for like an hour trying to figure out if I could do Zoom and YouTube because nobody was interested. And then you were like, yeah, I want to come. I'm like, perfect, let's do this. So I was kind of getting all set up for my for showing you what I was kind of gonna go and look through and do solo. I do solo podcasts all the time, so but I'm way more happy doing it with you because one, you can feed off me and I can feed off of you. So that's why podcasts with guests are way more fun. And then that way we can talk about it as we go. Because when you're a Liberal and you're in the convention, it comes at you so quick.
It's so busy.
It's so busy. And then they have a whole staff full of people that are sending us emails that are, you know, trying to have campaign colleges and stuff like that. So it's really hard to stay on top of it all anyway, right? And it's weird because this is my fourth convention, but this is the very first virtual one we've ever done, even though I know not just myself, but many people have advocated for that virtual option so that other people could participate. But it was really fun to do it. And coincidentally, it was the same time as the NDP are having their virtual convention. So if you're a Canadian and you're interested in politics, which is like, I think 5% of the population.
Real talk.
Yeah. So, but the thing about natives, like I've always said, that natives have to know school trustee politics, municipal politics, provincial politics, federal politics, Indigenous traditional governance, international, UNDRIP, Like we have to know all the governance. So it's like, you know how some people have to like, I don't know how to open up their mailbox and like that's a process. We have to know all of the shit that's going down on a regular basis because it always affects us in the most negative way, right? So the whole reason why I did this podcast is because there are going to be some people that are going to be interested to hear about the convention that are native, that it's like, okay, but what's really on my radar? But that said, because you're here and you identify as a queer Chinese woman, Canadian, like this is a whole concept, a whole conversation about racism as well. And that's what my whole podcast is always devoted to, is that conversation of ongoing racism. So, I want you to feel really comfortable talking about racism, and we'll talk about the whole convention and something that I don't think they've ever done, which is a conversation on racism. So we'll talk about that specifically. So I'm going to try doing a screen share so that we're all talking about the same stupid stuff together. Okay, so I'm gonna put that wide open. Okay, so this is not my notes for what I say on my podcast. Super lame, I know, but it helps me so much. So we'll start with the program. So, okay, let's back up even before the program. So I was super excited for this convention when it was scheduled pre-pandemic because it was supposed to be in Ottawa. And it was supposed to be the weekend after Remembrance Day.
My birthday weekend. It was supposed to be my birthday weekend.
Yep, there you go. There you go. So I was super excited because I went to Ottawa. The Liberals actually brought me to Ottawa. And this would have been about, I don't know, 2014-ish. Actually, it was the weekend before the shooting. That was when we all went as the Indigenous Peoples Commission. I think we were the Aboriginal Peoples Commission at that time. But we all went to talk about building a campaign. And they wanted to understand like what their failings were on res. But it was a lot harder in the end because in the end you had well-meaning, kind people who knew nothing about natives. And you can't in one weekend, like had we discussed it prior, I think what I would have done is like educational information for all of the staff. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We went there anyway. Fell in love with Ottawa. In particular, there was this ghost tour that was my favorite. So it actually starts right. I didn't even know who this one guy was, and he was an MP that got shot. He was an Irish guy who got shot, and so we actually start there. There's a whole pub devoted to this guy, and then my highlight was the ghost tour going into what's the Ottawa Hostel, because there was the original first jail, and they were so awful at the time. People froze to death, and they had like mothers with their kids or their babies in these jails with like no shelter, nothing. Like it was just like you could see the window that had bars in it, and if it was -60, it was -60. Fuck you, you're all gonna die. Big deal. Like it. So that was like my highlight. So I'm walking in these walls thinking, this is so inhumane. But so I think they had like 4 different levels, and like they kept the top one to look like the jail, like the original jail. And the other ones are like, no, if you want to sleep here, here's where you sleep. I'm like, who the fuck would sleep here? But it doesn't matter. One day I'll sleep there, just not with my kid or anyone that I love, because I would never want to traumatize them. Anyway, getting totally off topic. Fell in love with Ottawa. So badly wanted to bring my daughter. So badly wanted to so this was the concept prior to the pandemic. It'll be a homeschooling thing where we get to see an Ottawa Remembrance Day ceremony. She gets to do the whole Liberal convention because, once you have them hooked, they're hooked for life, right? And to me, civic responsibility is really important, as you know. So, it was really important to me that she's seen this whole colonial British Westminster bullshittery that is the convention. And I mean, and I say that with the deepest respect to the Liberals, because I think the same thing of the Conservatives, the same thing of the NDP, and the same thing of the Green Party. Like, doesn't matter what colonial party, you're all Westminster colonial jerks. So I wanted her to see this whole thing, learn the whole system. And the Liberal Party was really like, yeah, no, she can totally volunteer. So I'm like, perfect. So and I'd been to a previous one, so I was hoping it was going to work out. And then of course the pandemic happened. And then we were talking about possibly having like a, half in person, half virtual, but the pandemic screwed everything up. So now we've moved all the way over to April 8th and 10th. And we have like the whole program. This is available publicly. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sharing this because because I'm a part of the actual, I guess I'm considered national executive, but because I'm a part of the Liberal Party in a position, I won't share things that aren't public because I can't. I have a confidentiality agreement, but two, just because that's like I am protective of the party to some degree, not fully, but as you know. So anyway, I just wanted to show everybody kind of what to expect. So normally, if we were traveling, like Wednesday would have been travel day. Wednesday night, get your hotel, all that stuff, and then you're starting ridiculously way too early, and then going from there. So Kathy, if you want to chime in at any point of this, please don't hesitate, because this was your first time. So tell me about what a convention as a first timer is like for you.
I mean, I've done these kind of intensive meetings for work where, they bring you in, they fly you in to train you on something. But this program was absolutely packed. Like, I think it was and I would like to hear your experience in terms of in-person versus virtual. But I think for me, who is an introvert, and first timer, I think this was it worked for me because I could pop in and out. I'm in my own space. Like, I can't imagine running room to room in a large hotel with thousands of Liberals trying to get in, finding a seat, while networking when you run into other people and get the whole meeting. You know what I mean? So I was like, even by Friday, I was tired. Like, I wanted to attend all the panels. I wanted to pay attention to all the policy. I also wanted to hear about some of the campaign readiness stuff, but I actually didn't get a chance to pop into the campaign stuff because I was paying attention to all the panels. So it was really packed. So, I mean, what did you think about person versus virtual?
So when you're in person, first of all, there's not enough food. So the first thing, if you and I were going to Ottawa and we would have done this, I would have said, okay, but when we're going to stop, we're going to get like apples, we're going to get oranges, we're going to get granola bars, and we're going to stuff our shit with it, like our purses or our bags, because there's not enough food when they're there. Actually, they don't provide any food. So it's just dependent on the convention center themselves. You want to wear your cutest shoes, but I did the first time and I regret it because I actually think I permanently hurt my feet. So you're basically on your feet for 18 hours and your feet hurt so bad by the end of it. So like, wear runners, is how you do it in person. But even virtually, it's exhausting. So I was surprised at how exhausted I was, but it was so much better because I remember, so in Montreal in 2013, I actually cried because it was the first time I left my daughter, and it was the first time I was leaving my dogs, and I was like really uncomfortable with the idea of leaving my family. So it was really interesting being home because here I am on the lazy chair, my favorite place, and I'm letting Liberals see my favorite place. And I had my dog hopping on my lap and getting the odd kiss from either my daughter or my husband. So it was actually really cool. And then I had it set up so I had my computer. My iPad was the best for the live like YouTube streams, and then I had my phone. So and that's normal at convention too, where you're like on your phone the whole time, and you have to tell everybody, okay guys, we're going to take a group picture, so everybody look up. And if you actually look at our group pictures, you can clearly see we're all holding our phones. We would normally be looking at our phones, but we're not for the one picture. And it's still like that even virtually. So, I'm texting with you or texting with other people. And while I'm on these calls through the computer, Like, and that's normally what it would be like at convention. But you want to know the best advantage was the comment section in plenary policy, I mean. But we'll talk about, I'll break that down a little more for other people, but just that would be the difference between virtual and that. And then the other part is obviously the jet lag, because we're from Alberta. Like, it's hard getting up at 6 a.m. for a 7 o'clock start, but at least we're not, like, when I left to go to Halifax, that was like, I can't remember, like 4 hour time delay. I was like, it was almost like a dream, because it's almost like it didn't even happen.
And how long is your travel day from Alberta to Halifax?
Full day. So
Right.
full day there and then a full day back. So however long the convention is plus 2 days.
Yeah, I think the virtual, like, I can't imagine paying hotel, taking time off if you're working. And then travel expenses, food expenses. So I think,
Well, and I tried to tell them that. I'm like, if you want natives to show up, you have to make it more accessible. Like, that's completely unreasonable and unacceptable, unaccessible. Because, like, for me, why can I do it? Because I'm from Calgary and I've had 40 years of oil industry to help me be in a financial position that I can go, one person. Like, I couldn't bring my family, but
and you're passionate about it, right? You're gonna save that money aside to go to convention, to advocate and to voice, on policies, right? But
yeah.
if we want to attract the average Canadian, like, they said that in this convention we had the highest turnout of first timers, which is great. But yeah, like, it's for the average Canadian that might not know about politics, like, kind of like me. I'm just kind of 2 years into this, so I think it was for the price, and the accessibility is much better.
Yeah, I agree. No, it was wonderful having this as an option. And I think I just, like, a post-pandemic world, obviously we have to have this as an option. I mean, we had some of the most highest numbers for northern people because of it. And I'm like, duh, we told you this how many freaking years ago, duh. But it's the Liberal Party, and ultimately they do cater to those who are their funders and their donors, right? And they want to get together and see each other in person, which they can, just not during a global pandemic. But maybe now we can adapt it for the membership to be a little more accessible for regular Canadians, right? So yeah, anyway, so we're opening remarks. What was your highlight of Thursday? Did you see any of this on Thursday, or did you care?
You know what, I did. I'm just trying to think, because it was just so much. I really like Minister Ahmed Hussein as a speaker. I can't remember the days, but what I got was, I was surprised at how much attention that they gave to inclusion and diversity. I heard that a lot.
Yep.
That inclusion is a choice and that it's important. And I found it very interesting, the MPs that were, because not all of the MPs were there or available, but there were several that were repeated as speakers and kind of saying the same messaging. So yep.
Interesting. Can you still see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So the Friday session, this was one I had to get up early for. So my viewers are probably seeing 10 a.m., but this is Eastern time, so it was 8 a.m. So it was 6 p.m. or 6 a.m. for me. And so we had Carolyn Bennett, Mark, Jamie's. I don't remember Suzanne being there. Was she there? I don't remember.
Maybe an opening.
Yeah, and I want to say Dan Van. I actually have photos, and it's a good thing because I can't always remember. So what was a highlight for me, normally we see each other face to face. We get to say hi, we get to take pictures, we get to talk about whatever the issue of the day is. And like for me right now, it would be like, so Joyce Echaquan was a national conversation, what happened in Quebec, but we have one of those issues here in Alberta, and her name is Ashley Lillian, and I just had her husband on my podcast actually. So I was going to try to bring that up to them. But anyway, it was different in a virtual setting. So, in the virtual setting that you can have like a conversation for everyone to see or just the panelists. So I sent a private message to Mark Miller because of the policies that we've had. My husband got unemployment and CERB. I mean, he earned unemployment, but don't get me wrong, but the CERB part was really good for us as well. And then, the monies that they've given for urban Aboriginal or urban Indigenous youth, my daughter has been benefiting from. And then because of the investment into urban Indigenous vaccines, I have my first shot, right? So like I wanted to tell him that. He didn't acknowledge it, so it makes me wonder if he could even see it. So I'm gonna either have to do a follow-up email or whatever bullshittery. But anyway, I wanted him to know it mattered, and I sent it to all of them. So whoever was in that call, because these changed. Some of the speakers changed, and I seem to think there was more speakers in there. Michael Mccloud is one of my favorites because he represents my Dene lineage. He represents that area actually, and he's Native himself. So I think he identifies as Métis. Could be wrong, but anyway, he's a really nice man, and he always reminds me of home when I see him, when I hear him, and when I say home. That's ironic because I'm not actually like I've never lived there. So weird, right? Yay, colonialism! Yeah, that's how that works. So go ahead.
And so like how one thing what I would have liked to know is because because of you, Michelle, I'm learning a lot about the Indigenous people and my obligation as a treaty partner, that I didn't know that all the commissions were open. You could attend as an observer if you were not a member of the commission. That I didn't know, which I wish they would be more open. Because I would have liked to attend just to kind of see, but at the same time, I thought it was kind of like not maybe a space for me. But I'm curious, like, how were you able to see how many people attended the Indigenous people session? Or
actually, I'm going to take a minute and brag because ours was one of those old, how Zooms can have like 16 tabs with like 300 people on each one. Ours had that. And because of that, people could interact and stuff. So we actually got to see everybody in our Zoom. And because that was one of the first things on a Friday morning, that set the tone for the rest of the convention. So if you noticed in some of the comments and some of the other sessions, they were all like, how come it's not like the Indigenous Peoples Commission where we could see each other? And it's like, because you guys didn't have the Indigenous Peoples Commission actually run your sessions, did you? So there's a piece of me that's like, maybe you should listen to us. Maybe you should work with us, but whatever, it's fine. So, so yes, other non-Indigenous can always come to these, just like men can go to the Women's Commission, or just like old people like me can go to the youth ones. And I always encourage that because I think it's really important for us to, obviously listen to what's going on. But of course they schedule them kind of at the same time so that you have to make choices. So sometimes we'll have 4 things at once, and our viewers can kind of see this in the, you have your choice. You can either go to the Young Liberal Seniors or Safe and Inclusive campaign session. So there's a lot of people that are like, well, I would want to have gone to both the safe and the safe. Like I'd want to go to all 3. All of us would want to go to all 3. So, it's hard because they want to jam pack so much in, right? But sometimes they're super boring too. They're supposed to just be AGMs. So, and those are always fun. So did you go to the Safe and Inclusive campaigns? No? I'm trying to remember if I did or if I didn't. I seem to think I did. I'm pretty sure because it was a woman I didn't know, Jessie Splinder. Yep, that's right. Jess. I don't know how to say her name. So, and then what did you do? So, oh yeah. So let's talk about the ending racism and equitable and equal future. So this is a featured panel. So I'm pretty sure that will go up onto the liberal.ca YouTube once they've edited everything. Do you want to talk about it from your point of view?
I really love this panel. I Marcy Ian, is that how you say her last name properly?
We can just say Marcy because I don't know either.
But I think I saw you had I think it was a tweet that you said she was dropping truth bombs. And I think it was interesting to me to see these MPs talk about racism so upfront. You know, like she made a comment that if somebody is already vocalizing the racism that they're experiencing, they already have experienced that trauma. And I was like, you know, so and it was just interesting to hear they all have a very different perspective about it, but it was I think very important for us to see these MPs, you know, discussing it.
Well, here's the thing. You and I get gaslit all the time because you're just another native or Chinese-Canadian, and I'm just another native. So they don't listen to us. They don't care because we're not an elected MP. Because when you're colonial and you have colonial thinking, who's the top dogs? Those are what matter. And that's why, as much as a lot of natives hate Justin, because Justin's been saying that this is my most important relationship, doing land acknowledgements, and that was really emphasized in the entire convention. It does change the tone for all of those folks that gaslight us and marginalize us and won't listen to us. It completely changes the tone. So to have elected MPs that look like us say these words, like that's freaking self-healing, man. That's like self-care right there. So, and I just wanted to show everybody this picture that I took because this is my favorite picture ever of Greg Fergus. And he's just sitting there with that smile like, you motherfuckers, I've been telling you this. Welcome to my reality. You know, like it's just such a great, like, yeah, we're talking about this again. We were talking about this our entire like centuries ago. We were talking about this when I was a kid. We're talking about this now. We're talking about this last year, you know?
Well, I think it was Mary Ing that talked about a friend of hers that is, I think, Japanese, that had somebody that her family's been in Canada for 140 years. And somebody made a racial comment to this person saying, go back to where you're from. And that's like, that's Canada, you know, and that basically summarizes like what I've been through. But I wonder that I think it is very important that the MPs addressed it. But do you think that some of the Liberals are really going to pick up that message and learn? Or do you think that they're just going to say, I'm not racist because of association? That's what I wonder.
Well, a lot will do that. Don't get me wrong, but I've been doing anti-racism training for a long time. And let's just take out anti-racism training in general. Let's just talk about any skill that you need to learn or something that you have to memorize. Any teacher will tell you you have to hear it or write it or say it or understand it and address it like 6 to 8 times before you get the concept. And I'm sad to say, you and I get marginalized all the time and dismissed, but that's maybe 1, 2, 3 times they're hearing it from Greg 4 times, hearing it from Mary 6 times, you know, like, and it goes on. And then they're going to be hearing this now consistently forever because they've been given that permission to, basically through, like, I don't know, Justin or whichever. So now even the racists are going to hear it. And they have to start getting the concepts, like it or not, they have to. So now the next generations who are not paying attention, obviously those, like, this is how racism continues and perpetuates, that just because they're finally getting it after 60 years of privilege doesn't mean their kids are going to get it, doesn't mean their grandkids are going to get it unless they put effort towards teaching them. So, you know, and so anyway, it was really important for me for people to see this. So I just wanted to show you this little thing. So this shows me how many people are reading it, the analytics of it. So at least 2,000 people seen this tweet and at least 31 of them engaged. Now, we don't know demographics of that, obviously, in any capacity, but at least I have an idea that, okay, so some people actually did see this tweet. Um, and then I built upon it by saying, what did I say? What did I say? What was I saying? Okay, Greg Fergus be like, welcome to reality. It was great. And then Marcy was saying, throwing all the truth bombs, listen to racialized people. Like, fuck. How many times have I said that?
Oh,
Anyway,
and the story was it that Marcy shared about that child who was, I guess, skipping school, and then the cop showed up. Like that, I think addresses several issues that are policies, kind of what we were discussing. And yeah, that's a reality that a lot of people need to hear, I think.
well, I think people of privilege, white people, never get this. So if you miss enough school, do the cops show up at your house? No. But what took that to happen? That took some white principal, that took a white teacher, that took some, folks collaborating in their whiteness to decide this is a good idea to talk to the white police officer that's in our school and have this person go to this person's house and intimidate the parents, intimidate the adults, intimidate the kid. And this is why I'm against having cops in schools, right? Because if the teachers and the staff and the principal aren't bullies enough, then they use the freaking cops this way. And of course, white people have no concept because we don't put fucking cops in their schools. Like I grew up without a cop in my school because I went to a primarily white place, the same school that Dina Hinshaw went to. So we didn't have cops in my school. And to me, when I was a Sea Cadet, I learned firearms and firearm safety. As far as I'm concerned, you never have a firearm around a kid, period, ever. You just never do that. Like that's the stupidest thing in the world. And yet, we if we put a cop in a school, then that means a firearm is always with kids, and that is the last thing on the planet we should ever normalize. Like I feel like I live in a different freaking reality and dimension than everybody else because I have to say this. So anyway, for those who are listening and wondering what Kathy and I are talking about, there was Marcy, our MP, talked about this story. So I said, I love she told the story about the boy's first interaction with police because of truancy and the needs for allies to step up. So if you're an ally listening to this, this is why we don't want cops in stupid schools. Like this is not even, I can't understand how we're having this conversation. You would never do this for your kid. So anyway, that was kind of the point of that. Oh, and then Kathy, one of my highlights was actually, so Greg Fergus apparently is my favorite man on the planet because I can't shut up about him, but he told the story about after George Floyd's murder by the cop. It was Kathy McKenna that actually called him and was like, "Hey, you okay? Doing okay?" And that really meant the world to me because, as you know, Kathy McKenna, she gets like all of the hate on Twitter, on Facebook. It's constant, and she gets called Barbie. She actually did a press conference, I don't know, maybe 2016 or something, and said, if your agency perpetuated the concept of Barbie climate change or whatever stupid nickname they gave her, I will not do an interview with you. If you use that terminology, I will not address it anymore. And I was really proud of her because she just freaking nailed it. So, and anyway, so Greg being really vulnerable and talking about how that really impacted him, I wish everyone could hear because it's about that collective concept. So I see every single day in the media something anti-Indigenous all the time. And collectively, that's hard on us. That's racial battle fatigue. For the Black community, seeing videos of people who look like you being not just abused, but murdered, and then having people who don't experience that have the audacity to critique it. That's hard on us. And he just was so vulnerable and talked about that collective grief that you have for your race when you see that. And so I thought I really wanted to give him a shout out for being vulnerable. And then I seen him in another session somewhere else, and I messaged him and I said thank you. And he actually did message me back and said, "No, you're so welcome." So I hope he knows how, as a Dene woman in Alberta, watching him be strong out in Ottawa, how positively impactful that is for me, let alone, I don't know, Black kid anywhere in Canada. So I just love that. And then Mary Ng talking about the anti-Asian hate that she and her community are experiencing. And she really emphasized allyship, which I thought was so important. You and I were talking about, did the Liberals hear? If they didn't get it after listening to her, I'm gonna, like, it should almost be making them watch that video over and over and over now, as like across all riding associations, at every campaign, at the start of that campaign, like, this is going to be the video I'm going to be encouraging people to watch as like homework prior to me doing a land acknowledgement teaching or us doing any type of campaigning. It's like, if you need to watch this first so that you know what it feels like. Did you want to talk at all about that?
Well, I mean, I would love to hear this whole panel all over again, because like you were saying, there were so many truths that I was like hanging on to every word, that I was just overwhelmed with the whole thing of what they were saying.
Yep.
Like one of the MPs, I think it was Marcy Ian, said, and you've said it to me so many times, even before I even realized what racial battle fatigue was. But she said, like, racialized people are tired, and I think when she said that, it gave me permission to kind of just say, you know what, yeah, I am really tired.
Yeah.
And so I almost didn't, I really related to Mary Ng, because she represents an area where my parents live. So it made me miss home, and it made me kind of, it's important for me because I see her in me, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like, she represents a strong Asian woman from where I grew up, right? So
Yeah.
I couldn't hear what she was saying because I was so in awe that, she was so well spoken.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so happy. I'm happy that she was there. It has been hard going through that whole Jody Wilson rainbow thing. I mean, I have like 4 podcasts already devoted to it, but it's that seeing someone like you being mistreated that way, it's so hard to watch. So it makes me happy when it does go the other way, when you get to see someone that looks like you, who are not just being treated well, but in that leadership position to teach all the people who don't look like that person, this is what it's like to look like me. So
Well, and that they've gone through their own things too, like
yeah.
MP Ahmed Hussein, who's probably, I recall he's talked about being followed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think Mary Ng comes from a family of small business, from what I heard. And my family owned a small convenience store, so the things that she talked about, I could see and almost picture the racism that she's experienced, right? But yet these MPs keep on fighting, want to be reelected, continue advocating for Canadians, despite criticism of controversy or whatever our leader is doing. They're still putting their head down to get the work done,
Yeah.
right?
Totally. I'm right there with you, my friend. And I do want to give a shout out to him because like, I've tried to talk about this at the municipal level, but I'm very cognitive, very aware that the conversation I was having for running for, municipal, provincial, even today, I can't have this regular conversation with a lot of my neighbors who are committed to misunderstanding racism. But with him, I found it so validating, because when he talked about economic loss from discrimination, like, so for example, you know, we have that overrepresentation of Black people and Indigenous people in jails. You know, if they were given the same, like, if we reduce the barriers, the racial barriers purposely put on in place, that's a whole demographic of people that contributes to the neoliberal economic framework. I'm not a big fan of it, don't get me wrong. But even if all you give a shit about is fucking money because you have no morals and ethics, at least here's like, okay, your racism costs money. You know, can we at least all agree on that? You know, and then the loss of life, like the MMIW file, like that economic loss alone is ridiculous. Like, I just, if you have no morals, no ethics, you like being in boardrooms with the devil, like at the very minimum, if all you care about is dollars and cents, this is costing you money. So, you know, but I was just glad he addressed that as well. I think like, I think because, like, depending on where you are on the racism scale, where it's like, oh, if you're a person of color, I already know you've been pulled over by the cops way too many times. You've had negative cop interactions way too many times. Like, I know that. So I didn't even emphasize that with him. I just emphasized the one thing that I know only people who care about money care about, and that was that, in the hopes that we could have that conversation. So I finished it by saying, you know, hashtag self-care, because as we've talked about, like, it matters seeing that, right? Like, this stuff matters. So I was really happy with that in the end. So thanks for, like, you know, breaking down just that one session. Is there anything else that you want to add before we move on?
I think sorry, I keep on going off camera because I'm just addressing my dog, but who's barking in the background. But I think I want to go back to your point about Catherine McKenna and being an allyship. And I think it made me realize how important it is to have a network, like you have been for me, and like some of the other liberal women have been for me. That it is important to have people check in and say, hey, are you okay? You know, and that MPs need it as well,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's, you know, how we keep on moving forward and receiving criticism and dealing with these different topics, difficult topics.
Yeah, definitely. I remember trying to reach out to Patrick Brazeau in the middle of his, so, you know, what he was going through. And I told him, if any liberals are racist worthy, let me know. And obviously he had his network when Jody was going through her thing, same thing, silence from her end. But I think it is important. Like, I'm invested in any Native politician doing well. I'm invested. But then to have somebody on my team like Jody be mistreated the way she was, you know, that's an attack on me, as well as her, right? And she's so ridiculously, like, professional, and I know she has like a huge community behind her and a huge network, and she has a huge, like, non-Indigenous network behind her too that is always supporting her. So but I just love her to pieces. And I even folks like that, I think it's important that even though you're not in their inner circle, just letting them know how valuable they are. Like Selena, when I got to meet her in, I think it was Halifax, like, I took a picture with her and her husband, and I was like on cloud nine. And then when she went, like, I knew what she was going to go through, because it's not just racism, it's also sexism, right? And so you're like, her and Jody together is just like such a power couple, right? And totally, like, like, you can say one thing, but then it's just like Swiss cheese about the, you know, end of it, where it's like, okay, but if you're feminist, then you should know. If you're anti-racist, then you should know. If you're anti-colonial, then you should know. Like, it was so, like, they just showcased it, right? So it's one thing to say the words, it's another to live it, right? Anyway, I don't mean to go off topic so much. So did you want to add any more before we move? Okay. So needless to say, if you're a racialized person, that was, like, to me, the entire highlight of the whole convention. And we haven't even gotten into policy. So let's talk about policy. Okay. First, before I even get going, first, if you don't follow Canadian politics, our platforms are all based on our policy conventions, which this was. So it's been, what would you say, Kathy, at least a year, if not 2 years, of us developing policy to get to this moment?
I think I know it was basically after December 2019, right?
Yep.
After the election was
Okay.
when all the policy work really started ramping up.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really great having you, because I'm like, no, it never stops. I just tell people it just doesn't stop. And it's true, but it's great to have like you kind of verify and give that perspective, because that would have been at the height of my sickness, actually. So anyway, really, that was when policy started again for us to get to this moment. So this is like, for a lot of liberals, over a year and a half of work to get to this moment. So by then, what does that mean? That means we've had outreach within our EDAs. We've put together policies that we've put to our provincial and territorial, groups, which have been voted and rejected on, for it to get to national, which is where we finally are. And the commission, so the Women's Commission, Youth Commission, Indigenous Commission, and Seniors Commission, have automatic one that goes through no matter what. Like whatever our top priority is, it goes through. But then the other ones all have to kind of be dissected and voted on and talked about before it becomes part of our platform. So that's what plenaries are. These policy workshops are called plenaries. And so we have hundreds of policies from across the country that we have to kind of put into sections of whether it's infrastructure, growth, economy, social justice, whichever, right? And this is where we have this dissection of conversation. And because it was online, normally at convention, we're all in a room, and usually the room is not big enough for all of us. And we're all, bitching and complaining and yelling over top of each other, even though it's not parliamentary, but you still kind of do it. But so that's what the comment sections were. So I'm going to bring to your attention this GIF, which I think everyone knows, which is the funniest GIF on the planet if you've never seen it. This is and the person who posted it said it right. This is the one that you see whenever there's the good tea, or that there's gossip, and there's going to be the best online battle. This is the perfect GIF that you use. All right, I'm down. I'm here for this conversation. I love that one. And why did I love it? Because if you were watching the comments section in the plenaries, you got to see people arguing. And there was two folks very specifically who just wouldn't let it go. Now, I can't even remember if Leslie was her name or their name. I can't even remember, but it was just the point, like, Oxford, comma, I'm saying your name. You're wrong. Let me tell you why you're wrong. That was the comment section. It was so great. So what about you? You seen the comment section? I utilized it. I'm not gonna lie. I was that person once in a while, but I'll tell you later. What did you think of that?
I wasn't watching it too carefully, but definitely people were I was thinking, well, people, I don't know how, if you weren't able to connect to the internet, how you could really get the full experience of the discussion,
Yeah.
right? But it was a universal basic income takeover in the comments. That's what I saw.
Yeah.
But it was people, some people were like, yay, we're all here. But then some people were really like going at it, that it was hard to really catch everything, you know what I mean? Like if you were
it actually crashed my system. I had to at a certain point, like at the very start, people didn't understand the power of the comment section, so it was pretty quiet at first. So you could watch it, but after a while, like I had to shut it down. I couldn't even watch it because it would crash my system.
Because I was trying to listen to, they would present the resolution, and then they would present, the sponsor would speak on it. And then if there was a debate, there were two people for it, two people against it. And I was really trying to pay attention to the debate because I thought it was, some topics like financials and taxation, those are not things that I'm really paying attention to. So when I'm hearing the debate, it's like, oh, I understand why people are rejecting it. But so I couldn't pay attention to everything going on in the chat. But yeah, it was quite intense, you know.
It was. So just on Twitter, so you know how lobby groups work, and like, so lobby groups that we all know that are like, oh, Bilderberg and, you know, military industrial complex funded, and these are the people who are the biggest donors. That is true. But for actual social justice lobbying, that's not well funded, because obviously that would go against capitalism. Um, that was happening on both Twitter and Facebook, and I was definitely seeing it. So those who were in favor of the universal basic income were lobbying not just the Liberals, but also the NDP, because the NDP were also having their convention at the same time we were having ours. So I was actually getting tagged repeatedly. So when I showed what I voted for, I posted what I voted for, because I wanted folks who care about universal basic income know that I voted for that. Because and I mean, ultimately, I also know it. Like, I've read how many stupid reports about Indigenous issues. I know the Indian Act creates systemic poverty, which of course has created systemic trauma, which has created intergenerational trauma. Like, there's so much there, all rooted in money. Because we're talking about a neo liberal, you know, colonial capitalist system that was imposed on us, right? So those who they don't want to succeed, they've created systemic barriers for. So obviously a universal basic income would help reduce all of those barriers, especially rooted in poverty, which almost all of the Indigenous women in the jail are poverty related, so-called, you know, justice issues. So anyway, that's what, I didn't mean to get off topic with the whole universal basic income, but I thought it
Well,
was really important. Go ahead.
well, I am curious because, like, I know that there is a branch, I would say, of our party that is for universal basic income. I don't know much about it myself, but I didn't know that it was such a focus. Like, I didn't know that so many people would be for it. Do you think it's because of COVID, or do you think that that was already the environment or the cultural environment of the Liberal Party? Or, okay, so sorry, three-part
No,
question, Michelle.
you know what? No, I'll start on it though. So liberals are upper class people. So honestly, and unless they have economic investment, they don't really care.
I
But I
agree.
think with the whole COVID-19, that really like showed them. But I think it's more than that, where a lot of people are talking about our economic system not being sustainable. So even if all you care about is money, and you've gone to university on an, you know, to get your economic degree, um, even you inherently know this isn't working. So I think that there, I mean, okay, so let's be honest, like my communist friends, they were just railing and trashing us, and rightfully so, because you know, the conversation with the police, defund the police, is take the money that you're putting into this paramilitary industrial complex and put it into social services, put it into health, because that reduces all of this, which is 100% true. So, you know, universal basic income basically just allows us to continue to be slaves to the capitalist system. And they're not wrong, but just that bigger picture that you know, there's an uprising. Social media has basically allowed people to speak their mind, and people who wouldn't normally be heard are being seen, whether it's on TikTok, whether it's on Insta, whether it's on Twitter. Like, there are people that are become celebrities based off of that social media, and a lot of them have really important conversations to have about, you know, the problems in neoliberalism. One of my favorite speakers was on Power and Politics, and she talked about um, rather than like all the money that we're talking for universal basic income should actually be talked about going into social services. And I'm like, absolutely. And it shouldn't be a one or the other. And I don't think, like, I wouldn't disagree with this person in any capacity, but the whole defund the cops thing, that's that conversation of like the money that is going to cops should really be going towards social services. Now, I don't think our people in the Liberal Party think that way. I think that there's a very small amount of people that think that way. I just think with COVID-19, people who thought that they were middle class realize they're actually not middle class. They're lower classer than they thought. And are seeing, their kids. Like, you have to be a super privileged person to be able to afford to go to university now, to be able to have a mortgage. Like, that's a whole class system now.
I think university is double what it used to be when I went through it 15 years ago. I don't know how people are affording things, but I want to go back to the universal basic income. But do you also think it's a strategy that liberals support it to kind of get those NDP voters?
No, God, no. We never go after NDP voters. I think it's more the bigger concept is that, and actually it's one of our policies. Let's get into what did pass. I think that people are just really aware we need a post-pandemic economy. So I think that's part of it. Where did that was one of so we ended up with 26 policies that passed, and these are the 26. And I'm 100% certain that there was that one for, so we were talking a lot about transitioning away from the carbon economy, but there is one about, here it is, it's number 10, post-pandemic economy.
And
I
this is,
think
sorry,
all of the folks in the Liberal Party know we have to focus on this.
is this the order as they were prioritized? And is this the final
Yep.
prioritization?
Yep, this is it. So if you're like a Liberal that only cares about looking good in the party, you should have voted for the National Pharmacare one. So this is for people who don't understand what I'm saying. Basically, the membership of the Liberal Party gives permission to the MPs and the Prime Minister to put forward the legislation they're putting forward. And it's already been in the works, the National Pharmacare, because we've put forward this policy how many freaking conventions. So anyway, but they are legitimately putting it together. The bill and all of the work that's going through it, all of the outreach that you have to do provincial and territorial in order to create this. So this is like, if all you care about is looking good within the party, you voted for this for no other reason that you supported what they're doing. And that's, I mean, to me, it's like moral and ethics say you should support this, but that bigger picture of all you care about is, looking good and to save face. That's why. Um, so yeah, that's why I think we did it. Is because that's what we were working on, because that has been, I think, 3 conventions.
Yeah, I did not vote for pharmacare. I'm going to say not because I don't care about it, but because I know that it's been on the radar. I feel like I saw Minister Haidu on Power and Politics talking about how pharmacare actually, it takes 10 years to actually implement.
Yep.
So I know that they're working on it. I want to bring up too that I had a friend, it's a high school friend who actually helped me get connected to the Liberal Party because he posted something about the Ontario Women's Commission. And so I was like, oh, there's a women's commission. So that's kind of allyship in a different way. But he mentioned that I think he's a parent of a child that has a rare disease. And he told me that 1 in 12 Canadians, I didn't even think that it was that number, so common, are affected by rare diseases. And many of these diseases need Western medication such as pharmaceuticals. So
Yeah.
for these parents to help their children have a quality of life, it's very important, right? Or any of us to have quality of life.
Agreed. Yeah, no, we can't claim we have universal health care if people can't afford the drugs. I can't wrap my brain around that. So I think, and it's stupid. It's like back to economics. I mean, why would you pay $20 for something you should get for 3? That's stupid.
And a thing that I too am, because I work in healthcare and drug development, COVID is I think going to be a serious problem. We hear about these long haulers. I know a few. They're going to need long-term care, whether it's steroids, asthma puffers. respiratory therapists, you know, to help them, and other specialists that, you know, these people are going to need pharmacare in the future, in the near future, you
Yeah,
know, for
absolutely. I
if
had a
we don't.
friend, she got affected by SARS actually, indigenous, and she has permanent like asthma from it. So like the long-term effects of COVID-19 we're not even talking about, and worse because it's Kenny's like, we're gonna have stampede because I'm an idiot. He's like, yahoo! And I'm like, let's have a new variant so that next year when we're having this conversation, rather than doing an actual lockdown for 3 weeks, we're talking about the new variant that came from Calgary Stampede. Yahoo! Let's get her. Anyway, universal basic
So,
income. Go ahead.
you know, I have to say, for me as a first time convention goer, and also getting to know you, Michelle, and seeing how you work with policy through research, speaking about it, advocacy, and then seeing you develop a resolution and then sponsor and speak about it, and then have people, like, it was interesting for me to see this whole process, you know, and how it's going to affect the party, you know. So I don't know, I think it's a very, it showed me kind of what liberals care about. I'm What my question is now is like, now that we have these prioritized, is this like the government saying, yes, now we're going to work on ending racism in our justice system? Like, is that going to happen? Are we going to see that? You know,
Okay, let me tell
or
you one of my favorite policies that I passed in Montreal. My favorite one was that we were going to end discrimination in RCMP policing, and it passed. And then C-51 came out, which legitimately just continued that racism, because you had people at the table who had no concept what they were talking about. So it was like, yeah, my policy passed and I'm proud of it. I have it framed. It's sitting there beside my two-spirit policy. But C-51, like, absolutely ripped open my soul and took my heart and stomped on it as like, yeah, this is for real. This is what passing policy means. And I mean, if you, I had done the research, I actually have it hidden from Facebook, but I had it on Facebook basically showing all the previous policies showing, you know, basically let's stop racism in policing that we said we would do. So this is just a continuation of many, like every convention, we have basically one of these number sixes. But I don't know if we've ever had this many people of color as MPs before. And so that might be the game changer. We'll see. I mean, these are great policies. Stefan Dion had the greenest platform, and we had zero buy-in when it came to voters, right? Like they demonized him out here, out west. Stefan Dion, they made him sound, they the media like played videos of him. You know how when, and you've seen it with Justin, you've seen it with some of the other MPs where they speak another language, and it takes them a moment to hear a question, translate it, think about the answer, translate the answer, and then say it. Well, basically, out west, if you don't speak English, then you're a goddamn foreigner, and I don't know where you're goddamn from. So, you know, that was the image and the mentality that came here, right? And that's why, like, you see Justin or Jason Kenney's newest curriculum being like, we're only English and we're only from Britain, like totally erasing all of the French colonial history, which is a lot and not pretty. Not to mention all the indigenous languages, which has actually been our focus as a government for the last couple of years, trying to, you know, fund indigenous language. Now that's its own train wreck, but that's another conversation for another day. So yeah, will it get done? This whole end systemic racism? It would be, you know, acknowledging real barriers, which we seen with Jody. You know, we didn't want to address that. And here's where the liberals get a pass always. And all of my liberals who are white who are going to be listening are going to be like, so offended, but they know it's true. They know the conservatives are so bad and so shitty. Like, look at all these green policies we have. The conservatives just had their convention. They're like, what climate change? And now Kenny has this new curriculum that's like, is the world round? Is it? What's really gravity? And did dinosaurs ever exist? We don't even need them in our curriculum. So the liberals are so lucky that the conservatives are so ignorant and poorly thought out policies and so dumb and so against change that we'll win. They look so bad, we'll win. How bad is that? And I know my white liberals hate hearing that, but that's truth.
Yeah, I can't say like it was a learning experience for me. And I think some of these policies definitely shape kind of the values of what we want to be fighting for, like prairie water strategy, water resolution, the Green New Deal. There's a lot of green and social justice, protecting Canadians, but some of them I can't, like, I don't know, I can't say that they're like game changer, like it's going to impact a lot of Canadians, that I was surprised made it to the top of our resolutions.
But I think that says a lot about the fact that it was online and people who normally couldn't vote voted. I think that has a lot to do with it, because we're talking about, we had what, 4,000 people, I think was the final number. And I think when I went to Montreal, we had 3,000. So that 1,000 votes is a big difference, right? In what we're seen as a party about what got voted on as our priorities.
And I think it kind of showed me it's been a learning experience for me to get into politics, that it showed me that, a lot of us need more education on the resolution process, right?
Yeah.
And like what kind of policies we should be writing, and we should be thinking about the lens of all Canadians.
Agreed. I did post on Twitter as soon as I knew what our policies were, so that people would know. But it's really interesting because I talk about algorithms for Indigenous people or racialized people, and only like 54 people seen this in the end, like engaged with it. But I guess 14,000 seen it. But I mean, I have like 6,000 followers. So I don't know what it is about Twitter algorithms that just do this. But basically the people that should have seen this tweet didn't. And I even hashtagged it. So our hashtag was lib2021. And I seen lib21 was kind of on there, Canadian Poly. So anyone who's in those circles should have seen that, plus my 6,000 followers. Look at the algorithms, only like 1,400 people have seen that. So, people were like, well, what are their policies? And it's like literally free, available, public. If you go onto our website, they're free, available, and public. If you're just a Twitter person, they're on my Twitter. I put them on my Facebook. And yeah, like it's so wild. It's like all of these medias are designed to keep people ignorant about their own politics that directly impacts their life, for God's sakes. So yeah, I just wanted to show you that as well. I don't know if you have anything you want to add. I think I have all the tweets I was going to show you. And then we went through the policies and we kind of went through the program. So I guess what was your highlight and what was your low light?
I missed out on some of these conversations, but I heard a lot of hype on the news about Mark Carney. And whether he was going to run or so I'm curious what you thought about that keynote conversation.
It's a neoliberal conversation that economists love. If we were to get him, it would be a real asset for us going into the next election, because I think even conservatives respect him. But it didn't exactly feel to me something. As an Albertan, though, I should point this out. So like Albertans have it in their head that liberals hate Albertans. and it's been taught intergenerational. And I'm sure you're seeing this because of
Yes.
the crap that's out there anyway. Um, Living here, this is obviously very obvious. When you went to door knock, you probably heard it. It's so ridiculous. It's so ignorant that it's actually laughable. And I mean, I was born and raised here. So anyway, he spoke a lot about being Albertan. So he was born in he said Fort Smith, Northwest Territories, and he spent most of his time in like Edmonton, and he talks so much about Alberta in such a good way. So he's like very clearly being groomed to be the Alberta representation of the Liberal Party, you know, speaking to it. And then on top of him being an economist and internationally well known, you know, it's very obvious he's being set up for that. You know, Christina Freeland, she talks about Alberta because she's from Peace River. Like her and Rachel Notley come from the same area. So and now she's like an international celebrity as well, right? So it's not like there's not Alberta in the Liberal Party, contrary to what Albertans think. And I think that his keynote speech, which I'm sure will be public and available on liberal.ca here on my YouTube shortly, will actually, you know, there will be some conservatives because like as you've seen, you're here, you see how ridiculous you have like these wild rose, anti-science, anti-dinosaur, flat earthers that are just like Christian and like ridiculous. That's a huge base here, right? But there are some people who can, wipe their butt and be able to walk to and like do other things like breathe that might like they're like, oh, I don't know if all of these conservatives really represent my views anymore. You know, the Mark Carney type candidate is and that's why Kent Harrow was so successful, frankly, because he really, he's a white male, and white males like white males to vote for. So Mark Carney is a white male, right? So even if he, it would be smarter, of course, to put him in a more winnable riding, like somewhere out east in Toronto, probably against somebody we really want to take down, like Aaron O'Toole. So it would be one of those swing ridings that we'll throw him in, where it's like it could be liberal, it could be conservative, and we really want to take down this key conservative. So that's where we'll place him if he runs. This is all if he runs. But here's the thing: Jody was a co-chair in the Montreal election, and she wasn't even an out liberal at that time, and she wasn't a candidate, right? So whoever is like major celebrities in our convention, those are our next candidates, 100%. So like I see it a for sure thing. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I really noticed that MP Marcy Ian, Toronto, not Toronto Center. Yes, Toronto Center. She seems to be a very strong voice for the Women's Caucus, also being a woman of color, that I'm not sure it's good for the Green Party leader to try again to run against Marcy Ian in the next election. Like the Liberals may have indirectly wiped out the Green Party. I don't know.
The Green Party, they're only successful out west, right? Actually, that's not true. Didn't they get a new one out east somewhere? So I think they have two. But yeah, if they want the leader to win, they're gonna have to put her in a winnable riding for the Greens. Yeah. Which means she better be relocating likely to the West Coast here shortly. Anyway, yeah. And that's the whole thing about you can watch these stupid colonial parties be like, we want more diversity, but then they won't put a diverse person in a winnable riding. So like you kind of have to watch that and be like, he's looking a little hypocritical here, looking hypocritical over here. So yeah. So yeah, I guess any other lasting thoughts that you want to talk about the convention? Would you want to go to another one?
I think I would definitely go to another one, though I don't know if I would. I think prefer virtual, to be honest, just because of It's a lot. It's too much in person for 2.5 days. Like they should either stretch it out over time. And I think it also gave more people, like it was very valuable for me to hear some of these panels, like the one about the she session, if I'm saying it correctly.
Yeah.
Hearing some of these MPs that I have never heard speak was like really amazing. So especially the women MPs, because I'm such a feminist. But
You want to know something funny? One of the policy guys reached out to me and was like, I think you would be a really good candidate. Have you considered running? And I was like, that's adorable. That is the most adorable thing.
Yeah, but I think some things for the online platform could be improved, but I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would go to it again. But and it's funny because like I watch CBC every day, and I think it's funny because the public thinks that, oh, we're planning for an election. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like we don't really want one, but that's what we're secretly doing, right?
Yeah.
I didn't get that. Like, yes, there was always like, yes, please donate, support a candidate, consider being a candidate, but we really didn't have time to talk about campaign readiness.
Yeah. Actually, today is that day. We're supposed to be in doing virtual campaign stuff right now. And normally I'd be totally all over that, but I just I have to do my podcast. I have a Langevin rename meeting coming up, and like I got the MMIW. It's actually a red dress meeting coming up today, so like I'm just not able to do it all of that time, and I did the one thing I really came to convention for. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens, because like I know I was kind of being glib and joking, but the truth is that because of stupid conservative policies and leadership, what not just here but in Ontario and all around the world, you have these daft idiots who somehow have a mom and dad who like them enough to get elected, um you know doing the stupidest decisions in a global pandemic. I do see us having to be fighting a variant now, and so a year from now could look awful, and I hope I'm wrong, and I hope 2 years from now I'm wrong, and I hope that we are meeting in Ottawa at the next convention, or Vancouver would be a great place, who knows. But and it's hard to tell. This could have been my last convention for no other reason than this pandemic has like wrecked my fucking life and wrecked my husband's life. So, I don't know what our future looks like for me being able to volunteer much anyway. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I think from the convention, what I heard was a lot of inclusion, diversity, focus on women, and childcare seems to be coming up. So it'll be interesting what the budget says.
Well, amazing how when you have women in leadership roles and you have, well, some claim to be feminists, all of a sudden you're talking childcare. And I think we're the only, G7 that doesn't have like a universal childcare program, because we're idiots. I mean, other than the US. Anyway. So yeah, I think that's a really great conversation to have. Go ahead, Kathy.
Do you think that moving forward, like, do you think that the online platform was as successful? What did you think about?
Yeah, well, I think there's two things. We have a pandemic, like a post-pandemic reality. And I think a lot of things, like I think virtual just will now become the standard and the norm for our post-pandemic world. Not that we're there yet, we're not safe, and we'll see when safe is. I don't know when, but I think the other thing is this, is that the whole point of having conventions is to make all the money. And we had more people because we had a virtual one. So from an economic standpoint, even if you don't care about morals and ethics, then you go back to online so that you can get all of that money. I know I'm a jackass.
I didn't, it's my first time recording a podcast with you, and I didn't know that you were so honest.
Yeah.
Like, like it
Well,
is.
racists don't watch my podcast. That's the bottom line, right? Like, are they really going to waste 2 hours to watch me? Like, no. God forbid they learn something.
Yeah. Like I'm interested to see, now that I've seen what a national convention is. I'm going to wait and see what happens with the party. Like I still believe in the Liberal Party, but I want to see what happens with, now that we've done all this engagement and we've vocalized what's important, what's actually going to happen. Do you know what I mean? Now that we've voted, new national board directors, what's going to happen?
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. It's hard because it's like a long-term tenure like convo, right? Like when we were talking about legalizing marijuana, like I mean, people thought we were nuts, and to this day people make fun of Justin as some kind of stoner, taking over the country to legalize weed. And I mean, my own father was like, he got a weed charge when he was like young, and which haunts him to this day. And that was the stupid 70s when everybody was smoking weed. So to me, like, this is the stupidest no-brainer policy that should have went forward. And now that all the conservatives have their stock options as part of the cannabis industry, now we will never undo it, right? So they can make fun of it all they want, but I would open up their portfolios and have a look and see, how much of their money comes from cannabis investment now. anyway, but the point was, it took a long time, right? And it took a long time to get this pharmacare. Like, if they don't fucking vote in favor of this, Jesus Christ, useless pieces of shit up in Ottawa, I tell you. But it'll be this. You are gonna see, actually, here's my prediction. You're gonna see why the NDP and the Liberals hate each other so much. That's what you're gonna see, because Jugmeat is gonna smartly go, yeah, we'll vote in favor for this if, and it'll be something that will be like, fuck, that goes against everything. How do we navigate this? And then it'll be like it'll be an explosion that will lead to the next election, which will help the Liberals be able to say, we wanted to put pharmacare, but thanks to the NDP, we couldn't. And the NDP will be like, well, we put forward this and you guys voted against it, and you already voted against universal basic income. But both bills were full of shit, like they weren't real bills, right? Because the NDP have never been the governing party, so they have no concept of how to put together a real bill. Ooh, I'll get some hate mail from that one. This is where I sound like that, arrogant liberal. No, but for real, the Liberals and the NDP hate each other, contrary to what Canadians think. Like, they don't get to see the dirty of the NDP and the Liberals like you do when you actually are a Liberal, and vice versa for that matter. Now, apparently in Edmonton, they have a better relationship, but down here in Calgary, like, I'll never forget this one time. I went to this door-to-door knock it, and they had NDP signs, and I just wanted to see if I could, because they're obviously somewhat progressive and can think and like wipe their butt and breathe at the same time, unlike the blue signs. So I'm like, okay, we'll give this a try. And it was just this gay man, and he sat like this, his arms crossed, looking down at me, and he said, "Can you not see my signs?" And I'm like, holy shit, buddy. Like, all I wanted to do is try to talk to you. Clearly, you don't want this. That's fine. You don't have to be a rude prick about it. And I will never forget that moment. And that, because before I was like, benefit of the doubt. And, I seen the stupid shenanigans that happened with the Colonial Accord. And I don't know if I'll ever forgive Jack Layton for that. Rest in peace. But it is what it is. And then watching Tom Mulcair be like, no, we're totally okay with the Saudi arms deal if that means union jobs, right? So, like, it's hard because when you're a liberal, you try to do the best with what's the best interests of the country in a lot of ways, but at the same time, it's just like there's so many stupid games And now that said, let me say the good side of it. If it wasn't for Jugmeat kind of pushing the Serb thing, that wouldn't have lasted as long as it did. So, like, we definitely have the ugliest, most abusive marriage on the planet, the Liberal Party and the NDP. And you're going to see it. That's what's going to call the election, and that's what will save our ass from not implementing some of these fabulous
You think it's
policies.
going to be the NDP?
Always is. That's the history, and that's the irony. It's always the history of us, but for some reason, everybody focuses on the Conservatives, especially out here, out west.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll see when they announce the budget, and after, our convention and NDP convention, and see what happens,
It's a lot of power to be in a minority government when you're the NDP. Actually, like, they have a lot of power. And when you look at their policy convention and our policy convention, we have so many commonalities. So for these motherfuckers to get elected and not be able to make this work, like, it looks really poor on them. Not that it matters out here in the West, because out here in the West, we're all going to hate NDP and Liberal no matter what. But I mean, if you can think and read, then it goes against your best interest, right? And then out East, the Liberals and the NDP will fight with each other and hate each other and create another war of hate and go from there. But who knows? Like the WE scandal, it actually got brought up at convention with stupid policy that came from Alberta. Way to go, Alberta. FYI, Alberta, I got lots of messages of how out of touch our policies were compared to the rest of the country. And I'm not disagreeing.
How did you get messages? And could you please clarify how the WE scandal came up? I did not see that.
Yeah, it was in the plenary comments. So when our policy from the Alberta section came up about the post-secondary and volunteering, first of all, I should tell you my husband's reaction. He was like, that is the most elitist bullshit policy. And I just laughed and I said, I know, but it came from Alberta. What did you expect? So anyway, that policy, people said in the comments, they were like, we are trying to recover from a WE scandal. What the hell, Alberta? Right. And then, like, how you and I were texting each other, basically how that's what I was getting from other Liberals across the country, right? That are like, what's going on in Alberta? And I'm like, don't get me started.
Right.
But, yeah.
I think I did actually see that comment about, Yeah.
So anyway, I'm hoping Alberta Liberals kind of start seeing that there's like, I don't know. I was really grateful that a lot of the policies about green energy and low carbon actually came from Newfoundland, because a lot of Albertans ended up going to Newfoundland because, like, I don't know if you know, but Fort McMurray is basically made up of people from Newfoundland. So they got all their energy industry experience from Fort McMurray and then moved back home. And then it was he was one of my favorite premiers too, Danny. Anyway, he like totally gave like two middle fingers to the energy industry and is like, I'm going to get reelected. And when I do, Danny Williams, I can't remember, I'm getting that wrong. And he was just like, we are going to renegotiate our energy deal with you corporate mofos. And he did, and he won it, and he won hard. And they restructured their energy industry in such a good way that I was an Albertan looking over there going, God, because he was a diplomat like Peter Lougheed at the time, right? Anyway, so I was glad that a lot of the energy policies came out of Newfoundland, because I thought it gave a lot of credit. And then as an Albertan, it was really easy to say, yep, because I was really proud of our last convention. We had so many geothermal energy policies that I thought were going to totally help us with these like abandoned well sites and transition into low carbon energy. But fucking Jason Kenney, fuck that guy. Anyway. anyway, so thanks for being on my show. Did you want to say anything else before I do my closing?
No, it's been great I am forever grateful for you, Michelle. You do so much, and if anything, you've supported me through this journey in politics as a racialized woman who, and supported me in my time to come out as an asexual, and even if you feel like you've helped me, you've helped one woman, and I know you do that for so many others, that you are valued. And I think I'm going to continue on you started me on this journey that I'm not, despite how hard it is and how tiring it is to be a woman in politics, like it's not something I can leave now. So I want you to know that.
Yeah, well, and I'll continue with that because, like, we need to support each other because we can't depend on non-racialized people to support us. And even some of the racialized people, like some are like, in close proximity to whiteness and just cower to it. We get to see that with our justice minister here in Alberta. He just cows to whatever Jason Kenney says. And it's like, those are almost the most problematic. And anyway, I won't even get into her. Everyone knows who I'm talking about. Fuck. Okay, so who those who don't know what I'm talking about, when I was trying to save my daughter's school, the MLA, I actually was willing to work with, Derek Wildebrandt in order to get him elected because she wasn't willing to do anything. And now the school is absolutely up and it's out. They got their lease eviction notice. So anyone following the Prince of Peace thing, Rocky View officially is been served with their lease. It doesn't matter. They voted their MLA. They want this, and that broke my heart to see people not care about a public school, but whatever. I can just do what I can do, right? It's really up to the voters. It's really up to voters. They don't recognize how much power they have. And when they vote yahoos in, that's what we get for policy. That's what we get for COVID variants. That's what we get, and it sucks. It just sucks because the most vulnerable, they're the ones that are at the biggest problem with this. They're the ones who see it, the environmental racism, all of that. My husband and I were talking about universal basic income and how many Albertans don't vote because they can't afford to, say no to their boss, even though it's law. It's just the atmosphere is so toxic in Alberta that you are willing to like fight for a shitty, abusive job, right? So it'll be interesting if there's a universal basic income, how many people actually have the privilege of voting. And I come from the riding with some of the lowest voter turnout across the country. And I talk about the reality, but it goes in one ear and out the other with these privileged mofos who have no concept, right? So anyway. So it'll be interesting if they actually put forward a universal basic income. This is where if Jugmeat and Justin can work together, we could actually be one of the strongest G7 countries, actually. And all I know is that if we gave money to women raising their kids, we may have, well, it's part of the MMIW. So anyway, that's another conversation for another day. Thanks for being on my show, Kathy, and thanks for telling me your perspective. And if and when you are ready, you can come back and talk about anything you want. It doesn't have to be our other experience over this convention. It can be anything. And then just back to what you said about your kind words, like, thank you. But that bigger picture that, you have so much strength in yourself that you don't always see. And I think if we don't raise each other, if we don't lift each other, then of course we'll never have people like you who deserve to be there. And if you move back to Ontario, then you're going to be so much like, you're going to see this national picture in such a different way, because I've never lived in Ontario, right? So anyway.
I think I needed to see it because I lived in privilege and ignorance. If anything, I came here to learn, so, and I hope I learn and I listen. So
yeah.
Yep.
Well, I'm honored to walk this journey with you, and I'm just so grateful that you're in my life, let me tell you. So thank you for being on my show, and you're welcome back anytime. And with that, I'm going to stop the screen share because everyone doesn't need to see my stupid notes that I have for my, actually, I should share them with all of the links so that people can see them. Anyway, I'm really proud this podcast has given solutions and included cultural safety or cultural first aid in most of them to create a safer space for Indigenous people of color, those with disabilities, LGBTQ2 plus to speak. Thank you to the authors of Cheryl Ward, Chelsea Branch, and Alicia Fridkin of heretohelp.bc.ca, Indigenous people, what is cultural safety and why I should care about it. I said it in my first 100 podcasts out loud of that concept of how to create this a positive atmosphere. Their work includes that cultural action tool that I've said, support Indigenous people like this as part of your work on reconciliation and settler understanding. I'm just lucky enough to highlight it and repeat it here. Internalized racism or lateral violence is another form of violence Indigenous and marginalized folks experience by the structure of racism imposed on these lands. And you actually kind of heard me talking about it with our justice minister here in Alberta. Like, that's me being laterally violent. But if you don't understand racism and if you don't unpack proximity to whiteness, they are actually guilty of lateral violence by being in a position of power and not working at, MMIW inquiry process and reducing Indigenous and Black people being in the system. He's literally in a position of power to be able to change that. Indian Act, Indian residential schools, land clearing policies, other examples of like structural racism imposed. RacialEquityTools.org by Donna Bevins has a really great section on what internalized racism is. So if you're a racialized person, I really encourage you to start unpacking that. Me with anti-Blackness, anti-Asian, because of the most recent tragedy. Even I've been unpacking as pro-sex work as I thought I was. I still have some anti-sex work mentality that I have to unpack too. So I just encourage everyone to understand oppression dynamics. Do's and don'ts, bystander intervention by American Friends and Family. There's a link there about how to intervene if you see, people being harassed or targeted because of racism. So we're seeing that right now with the Asian community getting targeted. We're seeing that with the Muslim community getting their head scarves ripped off. Indigenous people every fucking day. If you see or experience racism, report it to ACT to End Racism or text at 18 or 15. Let's start that number over. Text them at 587-506-3838. And again, I don't feel bad saying that number because if you're racist, you're not going to text them because you're not listening. Indigenous people have been talking about our issues, sharing our traumas and reports, commissions, and public hearings just so it can be regularly disregarded. No more. Honor our words. Honor the treaties. Listen to politicians and their policies and platforms. If they don't recognize the marginalized in their budget with Gender Equity Plus, if they are cutting violence prevention services, childcare, Indigenous education, uterus health choices, gay-straight alliances, lack of human rights for migrants, immigrants, folks with disabilities, know that your vote to those parties directly negatively impact marginalized people. Demand that they implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, the recommendations of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal People, the multiple reports about child welfare reform, violence prevention programs, and now 231 calls to justice from the National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. Denying those reports is a form of abuse called gaslighting, where people are experiencing extreme racism in the educational and health institutions with multiple reports to say the same things. Demand change from election platforms and politicians. If they don't understand colonialism, racism, privilege, and sexism, they have zero business running. This should be understood by all parties, all local politicians, community organizations, sports teams. A great article I said out loud is Truth Before Truth, How Non-Indigenous Canadians Become Allies. Google it. Read it. If you're experiencing emotional distress after anything we talk about today and want to talk, call the First Nation and Inuit Hope for Wellness helpline at 1-855-242-3310, 24 hours, 7 days a week. And you can also text at hopeforwellness.ca. They have an option there. For more related to missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit, you can call 844-413-6649. That is toll-free, 24 hours a day support. If you are non-Indigenous, you have a functioning 211 usually in your area, or you can also call 1-833-456-4566. And again, if you see or experience racism, you can text or call Act 2 End Racism at 587-506-3838. There's a Trans Life line in Canada, which that you can call 877-330-6366. In the US, it's 877-565-8866. Oh, sorry, 8860. The Trevor Project for LGBTQ2 plus youth, 866-844-7386. And the LGBTQ2 plus youth lines peer support is actually 1-800-268-9888. And you can text at 647-694-4275. And of course, if you're as old as me, I even use the Kids Help Phone at 1-800-668-6868. And I want to say thanks to lifevoice.ca for all their crisis supports and LGBTQ2 plus crisis supports for some of those numbers. Violence is my everyday reality. Every Indigenous generation has faced it. That's why I started this podcast, to speak freely, without interruption, without tone police, without leadership shaming, without gaslighting questions, as many people don't want to hear Indigenous opinion, but sure want to tell us theirs by people who know nothing about Indigenous people or racism, colonialism, constant surveillance of Indigenous people, our protests, our vigils, and our rights. Then there's so I usually say, just typical microaggressions for people dealing with internalized racism. But it was actually Marcy who said, why do we even use the term microaggressions? Well, they're macroaggressions, and she's right. Anyway, typical microaggressions, macroaggressions, people dealing with internalized racism. Then there's the gatekeepers that keep us, all these systemic barriers. So that the status quo continues, and that people who are in their trauma can sometimes even stop other people who are, trying to do the work and deplete personal resources. Internal and external racism and oppression is an everyday reality for Indigenous people. That's why I started this podcast, as a boundary to be heard. Thank you to my ancestors, my granny, my mom, for what strength looks like through your example. My aunts and my uncles for always loving me and supporting me. I want to thank my dad for teaching me to be strong and blunt. My stepmom for showing me what a proud culture is through her Austrian family and roots, and stepping up and teaching me to be a proud Calgarian. It is through her I'm a second generation proud Calgarian. Thank you to my husband, Darcy, for producing and editing this show. On top of being my husband, my childhood friend, the father of our child, and support down my journey of the Red Road, he has witnessed decades of racism and sexism. And to our child, who we are blessed to learn from daily, I'm honored you chose us. You give me daily accountability to be a better and stronger person. I hope my daughter and my family will be proud in the future of me trying to discuss these present day issues in a way that they can understand. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. Thank you, previous donors, for already showing your support. If you value listening or watching and I can afford to give, thank you. To those who cannot afford to give, love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or your questions. I also have a YouTube channel where you can subscribe. Go to nativecalgarian.com for the latest podcasts and pin posts on social media. And I want to end by giving side eye to those Calgary rabbits. You're lucky I'm not your dish. My beautiful cousin would respond, or you'd be in my dish. Thank you for listening.